a secret accessory that only admins can use, and this is one that's no longer in the game. This is a complete guide to every accessory in Blox Fruit. Starting off, the very first accessory that we got here is the pink coat. This is an uncommon accessory which gives you plus 10% gun damage as well as plus 200 health, and you get this by defeating the swan boss who spawns in the prison in the first sea. Next up, we got the bandana, which comes in 3 different variants. This gives you 750 plus energy, 10% increase in your melee sword and gun damage, as well as an 80% movement speed boost, and you get this by defeating the elite pirates who spawn in random locations around the third sea. But the one that you get is completely random, but I guess you can farm for them if you want a specific color. Next up, we got the barriers. This is a rare accessory that gives you plus 500 energy as well as 10% defense against all attacks, and you get this by rolling random surprises at the Death King at the haunted castle on the third sea. Next up, we got the black cape, and you get this from an NPC called Paulus. This gives you plus 100 energy, plus 100 health, and plus 5% damage. And by the way, if you want to find him, the NPC is located at this tower in Marine Fortress. You just have to climb down the ladder. Next accessory that we got here is the black spiky coat. This is an accessory that gives you plus 200 energy as well as plus 200 health, as well as 7.5% increase in your overall damage. And you get this by defeating the Jeremy boss who's located at the Kingdom of Rose on the second sea. Next up, we got the blue spiky coat, and this one gives you plus 500 energy, plus 250 health, as well as a 7.5% increase in damage. And you get this by defeating the cursed captain on the second sea, and he's obviously located at the cursed ship. He only spawns every third night, so it's gonna take a while if you want to grind for this. Next up, we got the Chopper hat, and this one is actually very cool because it's the same hat that Chopper from One Piece wears. It's a rare accessory that increases your Blox Fruit damage by 3% and gives you a 15% reduction with your Blox Fruit's ability. It also gives you a 10% defense against all Blox Fruit's attacks. So if you want this hat, make sure you get out there and farm some CBs. Next up, we got the coat accessory, and the pretty cool thing about this accessory is that it actually looks different depending on whether you're a marine or a pirate, which is pretty cool. It gives you a 10% increase in your overall melee damage as well as plus 200 energy points, and you get this by defeating the vice admiral who's located at Marine Fortress in the first sea. He literally spawns on this big tower, and he's the only boss on the island, so you cannot miss him. Next up, we got the cool shades accessory. This is a rare accessory that gives you plus 100 energy, plus 100 health, and a 17.5 increase in your movement speed, and you get this by defeating the cyborg boss who's the strongest quest boss in the first sea, and you can find him at the fountain city on the small island stuck to it. Next up, we got the elf hat accessory, and the pretty unique thing about this accessory is that you can no longer get it. It gives you a 10% increase in your melee and sword damage, as well as a 5% melee and sword attack cooldown reduction, and a 20% movement speed increase. The way you could have gotten it is by talking to the Santa Claus NPC. You would buy it for a total of 250 candies. Anyways, the next accessory that we got here is very useful to Buddha users, and this is the Ghoul Mask. This is a rare accessory, and you can get it from an NPC called El Perro, who's located at the cursed ship in the second sea, and it costs 50 ectoplasm. This mask gives you a total of plus 500 energy, a 10% life leech on melee attacks against players, a 2.5% life leech on melee attacks against NPCs, as well as a 35% increase in your movement speed. Next up, we got the golden sun hat, and this is a rare accessory that gives you a 500 increase in your health as well as a 10% damage increase. And just like one of the accessories from before, you can get it by rolling random surprises at the Death King. Next up, we got the hunter cape, which also has 3 different variants, just like the bandana from before. This accessory gives you 750 health increase, a 10% increase for your melee, sword, and gun attacks, as well as an 80% movement increase, and you get this by defeating the elite pirates which spawn at random locations around the third sea. The next accessory is the jaw shield, and this is actually the same accessory that one of Kaido's henchmen from One Piece uses, and it looks pretty accurate if you ask me. It gives you plus 500 energy, plus 250 health, a 12.5% increase in your melee damage, a 10% defense against all melee attacks, as well as a 50% increase in your movement speed. So you get it from an NPC called Takamura. Anyways, moving on, we got the lay accessory, and you increase your health regeneration by 50%, which can be incredibly useful, and the way you get it is by defeating the Kilo Admiral who's located at the Great Tree in the third sea. The next accessory that we got here is the marine cap, and you can get it if you defeat a pirate as a marine, but your honor has to also be over 250,000. This accessory increases your sword and gun damage by 7.5% and also decreases the cooldown on your sword and gun attacks. Next up, we got the pilot helmet, and this is the best accessory for speed in the whole game. It increases your movement speed by 130%, increases your health regeneration by 10%, and your energy and health by 250 stat points. Damn, talk about an overpowered accessory, and it literally turns you into the Flash. And the way you get it is by defeating the first boss in the third sea, the stone boss, who's located behind Port Town. The next accessory that we got here is the pretty helmet. It increases your movement speed by 50%, your melee damage by 10%, a 12.5% defense against all melee attacks, and increases your energy by 250 and your health by 500 points. The next accessory that we got here is the red spiky coat. This is a rare accessory and increases your damage by 7.5%, increases your energy by 250 points and your health by 500. And the way you get it is by defeating the cursed captain, just like one of the accessories from before. Next up, we got the Santa hat accessory, and just like the elf hat accessory from before, you can only get this during the Christmas event. This is a rare accessory that increases your movement speed by 30%, gives you a 12.5% damage increase, towards your blox food and your sword, as well as a 400 increase with your energy and a 400 increase with your health. Next accessory that we got here is the shark tooth necklace. This is a rare accessory that makes you run 50% faster, increases your dash distance by 10%, and gives you a 25% damage increase for all sea events. And you can craft this at Tiki Outpost on the 3rd sea. Next up, we got the Swordsman Hat, and this is a rare accessory that gives you a 10% increase in your sword damage, and you can buy from Hassan for a total of 150,000 belly. Not really worth it in my opinion, because in the first sea you can always save your money to buy way better stuff. Next up, we got the Toma Ring, which increases your blox food damage by 10%, and you can buy this from Yoshi, who's located at Skylands in the first sea, for a total of 500,000 belly. Next up, we got the Top Hat accessory. This is a rare accessory that increases your melee damage by 3%, decreases your skill cooldown by 10%, and increases your sword damage by 10%. And you can get this by defeating a sea beast, just like the chop I have from before. Next up, we got Usopp's Hat, and this increases your gun's damage by 7.5% and gives you a gun attack cooldown reduction by 15%. And the way you get this is by just defeating 3 players. Shouldn't be that hard to do if you have an IQ above 5. Next up, we got the Warrior Helmet. This is a rare accessory that increases your melee and sword damage by 12.5%. It also reduces the cooldown for your melee and sword attacks. And you get this by completing the Coliseum quest, who's located at the cafe in the Kingdom of Rose on the 2nd sea. Next up, we got Cupid's Coat, which is actually a legendary accessory, but you can only get this during the Valentine's event for 750 hearts. And this coat will give you 12.5% more damage on your blox foods and sword attacks, increasing your health by 600 and your energy by 400. It also gives you 8% defense against any attack. Next up, we got the DS Code, and this is a secret accessory that only admins have access to. It gives you a 5% increase for all of your damage, increases your energy by 200 and your health by 200. Not really sure why this is an admin ability because it doesn't even seem that overpowered to me. Next up, we got the Heart Shades, and this is also an accessory that you could only get during the Valentine's event. It's a legendary accessory and it increases your gun and melee damage by 12.5% and gives you a 5% defense for all of those attacks, and increases your energy by 600 and your health by 400. Next up, we got the Holy Crown accessory. This is another legendary accessory. It gives you a 5% increase for your damage, a 5% increase on your defense, and a 5% energy regeneration, as well as 500 energy and 500 health. And the way you get it is by defeating the Soul Reaper raid boss, which you can spawn in at the Haunted Castle by getting Halo Essence and placing it at the fountain on that island. Next up, we got the Kitsune Mask. It increases your blox food damage by 10%. It gives you 2 extra instinct dodges. It gives you 15% regeneration on all your passive fruit meters. It also gives you 10% clearer vision and sea danger level 6, as well as 750 health. And you obviously have to be on the Kitsune Island. Next up, we got the Kitsune Ribbon, and this is a legendary accessory that gives you a 10% increase for your blox food damage, a 15% increased health regeneration, 30% increase in your movement speed, a +7 dash distance, and a 25% reduction on your flash step, as well as 2,500 energy, making it the most overpowered accessory for energy. How is that even fair? Next up, we got the Leviathan Crown. This increases your melee damage by 12%, your damage to sea events by 35%, your health regeneration by 25%, a 40% sea event material drop chance, as well as 1 extra instinct dodge. And to craft this, you need 1 dark fragment, 10 Leviathan scales, as well as 5 electric wings, which are all extremely difficult to get. Next up, we got the Musketeer Hat, which is yet another legendary accessory, and this increases your sword and gun damage and reduces the cooldown for its abilities. And you can get this after completing the Citizen's Quest. Next up, we got the Pale Scarf accessory. It increases your blox food and sword damage by 15%. It gives you 2 extra instinct dodges and increases your instinct vision range by 10 times. That literally makes you see the whole world. Not really, but you can see extremely far with this. Next up, we got the Swan Glasses, and these increase your movement speed by 25%, your overall damage by 8%, your skills cooldown by 8%, increases your defense by 8%, and it gives you 250 energy as well as 250 health. Next up, we got the Terror Jaw accessory, and it gives you a 10% increase on your sword damage, a 10% skill cooldown reduction, a 20% defense against all sea events, as well as a 200 health and energy increase. And you get this from the Shark Hunter at Tiki Outpost. Next up, we got the Valkyrie Hammond, and this is actually an old accessory that Rip Indra used to have on his avatar until he changed it. It increases your sword damage by 15%, and it also increases your energy and health by 600 points. Damn, that is a huge increase. And you can only get this after defeating the Rip Indra raid boss at the castle on the sea. Next up, we got the Zebra Cap, and you get this by defeating the Order boss, who you can spawn in at the 2nd sea. This increases your sword damage by 10%, decreases the cooldown on your blox food abilities by 15%, increases your energy by 500 and your health by 100. Next up, we got the Dark Coat, and it gives you a +600 energy as well as +600 health. It also gives you a 15% increase in your blox food damage. Next up, we got the Holiday Cloak. This is yet another mythical accessory that increases your blox food damage by 10% and also gives you 1 extra instinct dodge. You could only get during a special event. Next up, we got the Leviathan Shield, one of the most overpowered accessories in the whole game. Increases your defense against all melee, sword, and gun attacks by 15%, gives you a 30% defense against sea events, and gives you a 90% protection against water damage. And it also increases your health by 1000. And the way you can get this accessory is by crafting it from the Beast Hunter NPC. Next up, we got the Party Hat accessory, and this gives you a 10% increase in your experience, a 10% increase in your mastery, as well as 400 energy and 400 health. And this is actually the only accessory in the game that lets you level up and increase your mastery fast. And you can only get this during the confetti event, and I don't think they're ever going to add this back.